Hello and welcome to this week's podcast episode. I am joined by a very special guest today. All the way from the USA, we have the lovely Terri Kozlowski, who is an author, a speaker, and a coach as well. And I'm very excited for our conversation this morning for you over in the US. So, Terri, can you introduce your lovely self to our audience?
Sure. My name is Terri Kozlowski. I am an Athabascan Native American, and I have an author of 2 books. I've done my own podcast of over 200 episodes called Soul Solutions that I am no longer doing on a regular basis, but it is all about making sure that your soul has the solution it needs so you can have a life of thriving.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And what I love about the work that you do, it's very much connected to the alchemy and transformation, which is beautiful. We have such an alignment there, which is gorgeous. So tell us a little bit about your transformation, because your story carries a lot of transformation from the trauma to awareness to freedom. So tell us a little bit about your story of transformation.
Okay, so I'm going to give you the condensed version of the trauma. My parents divorced when I was little. My dad got custody. We went to visit my mom when I was 11. She was an alcoholic, but we didn't know she was a drug addict. And our summer visit that was supposed to be 8 weeks ended up only being 4, because 2 weeks into it, she started drinking and started using drugs. And she allowed 3 men to steal my innocence so that she could have drugs for free. And then she literally took our suitcases and put it out on the streets of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and said, "It's time for you to go home." And so I grew up very fast and had to take care of my baby sister, who's only 11 months younger than I am. So I was parenting her and trying to get us back to New Mexico, from New Mexico to Pennsylvania. And when I got off the plane, when we got back to my dad, I walked calmly up to my dad and said, "We need therapy." This was back in the 80s when I shouldn't have known what therapy was. And I knew at the time that I didn't do anything wrong, which is unusual. I had I'm an old soul, with a lot of presence of who I thought I was supposed to be. And then, of course, the trauma changed all of them. And the thing with trauma is it turns on the egoic brain into overdrive, because the egoic brain is meant to keep you safe. So because of the trauma, everything in my life became terrifying, especially when you look at the fact that my mother had a hand in what happened to me. So if you can't trust your mother, who can you trust? And that was ultimately an underlying core of me not trusting the world. And therefore, if you can't trust the world, everything around you is terrifying, because people are everywhere. So as I started the healing journey, one of the things I realized was that I needed to be upfront with people. When I was 12, I told my dad what happened. And surprisingly, my dad gave me the answer to the question that I needed. However, I was 40 when I realized it. I didn't understand it at the age of 12, because at that point in time, God and I were very much arguing. I was raised, and I was raised baptized Lutheran, raised Roman Catholic. So I was very much seeking what that spiritual path was supposed to be. And in doing that, I knew that God was always present with me. And even during the trauma, God sent an angel, and very clear that there was an angel present. But at the same time, you get wrapped up. The egoic mind starts us down a trail of any trauma with why me? Yeah. And why me is one of the hardest questions to answer, because the reality is, no matter what the answer is that we're given, we will not accept it. Because my mother's reason was I needed drugs. Well, that's not an acceptable answer to have your child be abused. If she would have said I didn't know any better, that's still not an acceptable answer to why I was abused or why she abandoned me. So when we get wrapped up in the why me question, the reality is it's the wrong question, and we stay stuck in the trauma and we have no transformation. And so to start the transformation process, the question my dad said to me at the age of 12 that I did not recognize, what, now what? Now what? Now, at 12, I thought, did he think I wanted to prosecute? Did he think, I was already in therapy? What? I didn't understand the question. But when I turned 40, I realized the now what question was, wait a second. He acknowledged that something bad happened. I acknowledged something bad happened. But the reality was I going to allow something that I had no control of? I did not say, this is what I wanted to happen to me. And was I going to allow my past to continue to affect my present and my future? This is where responsibility comes in. Responsibility is the first step in any type of transformation, because you have to be aware that you can make a difference, that you can change your life. And this is where I started realizing that, yes, bad stuff happened. It wasn't my fault. And I needed to determine and decide, okay, that's in the past. Yes, I still have triggers. Stuff still comes up, but I was going to take responsibility for my life moving forward. And my past was no longer going to be the reason for any of my present or future transformation in my life. I was transforming what happened to me and becoming my true self, my authentic self, because when trauma happens, the thing that we do when we start going into that egoic mind is we put on masks and armor. We protect ourselves. That's what the ego is meant to do. So we put on our armor and we put on a smiling face. And one of the things I learned in therapy was, as long as people thought you were okay, they wouldn't ask you questions. And I hated being asked, are you okay?
Yeah.
Sure you're okay? Are you able to do this? I hated that. Just, if I had a problem, I would let you know if I had a problem. But for them, I hated the question. So put on a smiling face, put on all your defense mechanisms, and you'll have a perfect little life, and people left you alone. And that is what I wanted. I wanted to be left alone. So in doing that, we feel broken because the mask and armor fracture us. Little lights of authenticity come out, and we're supposed to take off the mask and armor so that our true light and our authentic being can shine and then help others in the process.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing that, lovely. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that, and especially the mask and having to, smile, pretend everything's okay. And also like dealing with trauma on that level, even if not on that level, we all go through things that can, trigger that ego response. And I think what you said about the why me is something that comes up so often. And I always say, like, it's the lowest level of consciousness. It's like when we're saying that life is happening to us and like we have no control and we just have to take it. And I think, yeah, it's really interesting that you said like how you managed to transform and come out of that. So for anyone listening who is currently still kind of in that phase, and almost logically we know, well, I don't want this to hold me back. I don't want this to be determining what my reality is and what my future is going to look like. But how did you manage, obviously over time, to get out of that state of going, well, this is really shit and really horrible. Like, why has this happened to me? How did you shift from that into going, do you know what? This isn't going to be what molds me and what creates my reality.
So one of the analogies I use is the thorny blanket, because a lot of people, when trauma occurs, we wrap ourselves up in that comfort of the feeling that we know. We know pain. We know trauma. And we start to identify that our whole being is that pain and trauma. And we forget that I was a happy little girl before all this happened. We forget that I loved cats. We forget that I used to go down to the creek and just sit there and listen to the birds and the water and understand that that was happiness. That was peace. And we forget that we had those moments in our life. Because so we're sitting wrapped up in this thorny blanket. And what I realized was I got comfortable. I got used to this painful blanket. And the only way to move forward was to unwrap myself. And this is where it gets sticky, because this is where the messy middle comes in. Because although you know that this blanket is of pain, what you don't realize when you start taking it off is that there were thorns in that blanket. So you now have piercings in you, and you remove that, you have to start the healing process. And the healing process is not pretty. You know, if you look at a thorn prick or whatever, you cut yourself, it scabs. Heaven forbid you get an infection and it's oozing green things. So this is what the healing process looks like. It's not pretty. It really isn't pretty. But this is what I call the messy middle. And as you go through the messy middle, one of the most terrifying things is all the strange emotions you are now feeling. Because when you're wrapped up, you know what that feels like. But when you unwrap, you don't realize what healing feels like. Healing is that process where, oh, I've been triggered. Okay, so the three men who molested me were Hispanic men. And when I saw a group of Hispanic men walking toward me, I, of course, got terrified. Yeah. It is what your ego does, but it's always amazing how the universe puts us into those situations to help us overcome these things. I started working for a company where it was owned by Hispanics, surrounded by men all the time. So over time, I realized that it was unfair of me to judge a complete race and sex of men, saying that these people are bad, when the reality is I only had 3 that I know were bad. All these other men that have come through my life that were Hispanics have all been kind and gentle and empathetic and compassionate human beings. And I had to let my ego still, because my ego now, even though I'm on complete other side of the healing journey, my ego will still say, oh, there's some Hispanic men. And I have to remind myself, yes, thank you, ego, for letting me know I have been healed from that, and I can move past them and smile and say hello to them. Where in the past, I would go to the other side of the street so that I would not get near them. So those are some of the steps in that healing process. And the big triggers are the easy ones. It's the little triggers that you don't, you deal with the big ones and you know what they are. But when I was a teenager, one of the things that I didn't realize was I didn't like being touched. So somebody coming up behind me like they do in high school and tapping you on the shoulder, I would come around with a fist because don't touch me. So I had, when I was a teenager, realized that I had to tell my friends, holler at me, but don't come up and try to scare me or surprise me, because you will not like the consequences. And I always had been conscious that I was different and I moved through the world differently because of my trauma. Or I told my friends that, I had some bad stuff happen to me, and therefore I react sometimes instead of responding in an appropriate way. Please have compassion for me. So I was able to have those conversations. As you age, you don't tell your story. You don't want anybody to know. You don't want anybody to make you feel, that you're different or something. You want to fit in. You want everybody to think you are that perfect little person, with a perfect little life and all that good stuff. But the reality is, statistics currently, 1 in 3 females are sexually assaulted by the time they're 18 years old. This is not something that's happening like it was in the 80s where nobody talked about it. The first person that I found out that had this similar story was when Oprah Winfrey came out on her show saying that she was sexually assaulted. So that for me was the first. I didn't know anybody else. And it was many years later before I got into a little Bible study group where we talked about it. And it ended up being that 4 of the other women in the small Bible study group had all been sexually assaulted. And that was when I realized, this isn't about me. This is about me helping others heal. And that is where the alchemy comes in. It went from, this is all about sad little Terri, to the reality that no, this is about Terri reaffirming her power, taking her power back, finding that inner authority, and going out of the world and saying, hey, you're not alone. There's a bunch of us out here. Guess what? I'm on the other side of the healing journey. Let me take you by the hand and walk you through the process. You can do this. You'll be fine.
I love that. And that is so powerful when we can take people on that journey that we've been through and help them through the other side. Did you know what that was going to look like when you first had that realization? Did you know that you were going to like become a coach or a healer? Did you know like what it was going to look like, or did you just know I need to do this?
So when I was 20, 21, 22, I had been talking to a room full of women, and that didn't bother me in the least. I had somebody then ask me about writing my book, writing my story. And it wasn't just no, it was hell no. Looking back, part of the reason was my mother was still alive. My sister did not know the whole story. And my dad had been in a place where he felt a lot of guilt, and I did not want. So there was a lot of, looking back, I see the reasoning why. But for me, I was just terrified to actually put it into words. The year I turned 50, I became pregnant with a book. And in 9 months flat, I had written my book, over 80,000 words. It was completely downloaded. And it took me 18 months to edit it, because a lot of the download was for me. And for me, in that download is where I recognized the angels that had come into my life. And one powerful angel was a guy named Alan. And he went, when we went to New Mexico to visit my mother that summer, Alan was with her when she picked us up. He was not very much taller than she was, and she was only like 4'11". Wasn't much taller than she was, had a big cowboy hat, big belt buckle, cowboy boots, and he was a nuclear physicist at Los Alamos, and that's all I know about him. He took us out to a restaurant and fancy. We had a really good time. And then he did a really, really strange thing. When he dropped us off at my mother's place, he handed me his business card and said, if you need anything, call me. And for some reason, I took the business card and stuck it down in my suitcase, because we happened to be with the bags, stuck it down in my suitcase. And after everything had exploded with my mother and my dad, I called my dad and he said, you have a way to get to the airport? Alan's name dropped into my spirit. And I said, yes, I have somebody that can take us to the airport. And I called Alan, told him that my mom had kicked us out and that we needed a ride to the airport. Told him where we were, and the flight was at noon. He picked us up at 7:30 in the morning, took us out for the biggest breakfast I ever had in my entire life, and then walked us, my sister and I, hand in hand onto the airplane. And then he disappeared. I never saw him again, never heard of him again, never thought of him again until I wrote the book. And when I wrote the book, I realized a lot of the people that come in and out of your life, how significant they are, what a blessing they are, and those people that are not meant to stay. Because in that, whether it was they were there for you or you were there for them. And I saw the reciprocal aspect of me being there for somebody else that disappeared out of my life. And understanding that that's the way this life is supposed to be. We come in and out of each other's lives for a reason. And then as long as we are not attached, and that's where I started having issues. And one of my later things in life was I attached to people inappropriately. And what I mean by that is a good example is my granddaughter. When my granddaughter was born, my husband and I had started talking about retirement and moving. And I'm like, we can't move until my granddaughter's 18 years old. And then I realized during COVID that was an inappropriate attachment to have. Why am I stopping my life with my husband because my granddaughter is here? she can fly to visit me. I can fly to visit her. I mean, there are these things that we have nowadays that we can do that. And that's when you realize that still the healing process has to continue. And the reason for my attachment issues was because I never really attached to my mother in a proper way. And when you don't attach properly, it causes issues with the relationship with parents, with your children, with grandchildren, even with friends. And interesting enough, everybody gets so consumed with the from my abandonment from my mother is the underlying cause of all that. And then part of that healing process is realizing that the ego made me push people away in order that I would not get hurt by them abandoning me. Mm-hmm. So, or to confirm that, oh, look, they did leave me.
Yeah.
So then we perpetuate this. And this was happening during my teenage years, is when I realized that if you push people away, they can't abandon you. And then in my 20s, I realized, oh, wait a second. This is just reaffirming everything. So in my current marriage, I've been with my husband for 28 years. My first marriage lasts 7. And my first marriage, I married this man because I wanted his mother as my mom. And wrong reason to get married. I got a son out of it, and in the divorce, I got his mom as well. So I end up maintaining that relationship because I learned along the way that the reason for the attachments that we have in this life is for our growth or the other person's growth. Yeah. And although I wanted this mother for my mother, the reality was she needed me more than I needed her. And so it ended up working out very well. And my current husband gave me that safe place. And what I mean by that is I went through all of my teens and 20s where I wasn't feeling safe. And my first husband actually said to me, this happened when you were 11. Shouldn't you be over it by now? And the reality is there are things that I was over, but there were still things coming up because trauma is layered. Anything about your childhood is in layers because you can only process so much information as an 11-year-old, as a 16-year-old, as an 18-year-old. And as you age and get more life experience, your processes change because you're growing. And for most, get stuck in their trauma. And so I was 11, and I believe that every 10 years you should do a software update and have some sort of major growth spurt. I did not do that when I hit 20. Did not do that when I hit 30 because I did not feel safe enough to do so. So when I married my current husband, he gave me that safe place. And in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety is number 2.
Yeah.
You can't self-actualize unless you're safe. So my husband gave me that safe place, and then I started doing massive growth. And so I updated to 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and I am currently on 5.5 and a half. So I am doing well in my upgrades.
I love that. Terri version 5.5.
Yes.
I love that. There's so many things there that I want to kind of like come back to, but I think the attachment stuff fascinates me. And it was the core part of my psychology master's was on attachment theory. And it's funny, and I can laugh now, but you described like basically my 20s and my early 30s with, you know, we either won't attach because we're scared, or we will, and then we'll prove ourselves correct. Because that person will leave. And we are always in this fulfilling prophecy. And I always say, you know, whatever you believe, you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
You will always be proven correct. That's how the world works, how your mind works, how science works. You will always be proven correct. But I want to come back to the book because I feel a lot of people listening will potentially have a book within them as well. But also, I love the way you described your book coming through you as like downloads, because I had exactly the same thing. And people look at you like, what do you mean you just had like a book downloaded here, like a file?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, kind of. So for those listening that are thinking, oh, I wonder if I do have a book within me, or I've always thought about writing a book, was there anything that you did to start the download process, Or when you started to get those downloads, how did you then turn that into actually sitting and writing?
So for me, I've always been creative, and part of, I think, as a child, I was very creative. In high school, I was told by an art teacher that I was not good. My painting was not good. And so that shut that off.
Mm.
And then in my late, I started going to a paint and sip class, and it was a lot of fun. And it was interesting because when I tapped back into that creativity is when I allowed the book to come through. I think that if I did not shut that creativity off in me early on, the book would have come in a lot soon. So for me, I ended up writing a poem. And the poem is in my book, Raven Transcending Fear, which is my memoir. The first part of that is the poem that I wrote. And then from there, I just sat at my computer and started typing. And I'm literally, that's all I did. Words would come through my head and I would just be typing and typing. And I could type for 6 or 8 hours straight. And then I'd walk away. I wouldn't read any of it. And that's one of the things that I know a lot of writers go back and read things. Yeah. So I write and then I'm done. And then I'll go back and do it. I'll go back and edit. And the reason for that is, for me, that creative process, those words downloading, is just that. I don't want to stop that flow.
Yeah.
And there's a whole science on flow.
There is.
And when
you
yep. And when you end up going back and rereading or going back and trying to edit, or I don't think that sounded right, you stop flow.
Yeah.
So for me, I just write. And when I get out what I feel I need to get out, close it up and walk away. So in 9 months, I wrote the book, and 18 months to edit. This is where the ego comes in, and where I realized that some of it was stories for me. And things that I needed to remember that didn't need to go in the book. And one of the things, because trauma can be so triggering for others, and I did not want to have a lot of other people triggered by reading my story. I wanted them to actually get to the healing process. Chapter 2 of my book is when I was in New Mexico. So it starts off with us arriving and it ends with us leaving. And of course, the trauma episode is in there, but it's one line. It may be one whole paragraph, but because, and somebody said, well, did you write details? I said, no. Why would you do that? Why would I try to trigger somebody in reading that? Number one. Number two, why would I want to relive that in a way that was triggering for me? And that's where a lot of people get stuck in their story, is and no offense to people in the 80s, they did not know, when I was in therapy, they didn't know what to do with me. So we never did talk about the rape. And I was in therapy from 11 to 18, never talked about the rape. We did talk a little bit about the abandonment issues, and they have known about the rape because I told my dad about it. And my dad made sure the therapist, I had gone through counselor, therapist, psychiatrist. I went through the gambit trying to figure out what to do with me. And I give my dad great credit that they wanted to medicate me, and he said no. So I'm sure I went through a depressive phase, because I think that's part of us looking backwards. To me, depression is fear of the past. So the more I continued looking at the past, the more depressed I got. But then I had to switch. Point 180. And now I was terrified about the future, and that's where anxiety comes in.
It's a great pendulum.
And that is, and I think a lot of times that is where, for me, the overcoming of the fear is where the alchemy came from. I mean, that's where my alchemy truly was all that fear about moving forward with life, being fearful of me. Because when you cover up who you authentically are and you're not sure, then is that really me or is that the trauma?
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? And I figured out what was truly me and what wasn't. So if I am reacting from a place of fear, that is my trauma, that is my egoic mind, that is the negative part of me that are still in me reacting to something. If, however, I can pause and respond from a place of love, reconnect with my soul and respond from a place of love, that is authentically me.
Yeah.
So when I'm caught in a place where I don't know, I'm like, well, was I fearful? Or was I coming from a place of love and for everybody's ultimate highest good? And that's how I differentiate the two now.
Yeah, that's really, really useful. And I think there's a lot of people will be like, well, what happens if I'm afraid, but it's like something that I want to do? Like, how do you differentiate when it's fear because actually it's meant for you and it's something that we are supposed to go ahead and do, or it's fear because actually we shouldn't do it?
So fear that is excited is a positive fear, because sometimes we think of excitement and we think that it's fearful. But if we're looking forward to it and we're excited, but it's something we've never done, so we're slightly fearful because it's a new venture, but we're excited about it, do it, because that's meant for you. If, however, you are fearful and you're not quite sure and there's anxiety in there, that's different. You need to sit back and take a look at it as, okay, let's ask myself some questions. If I do this, is it going to bring more positivity in my life, or am I doing this because somebody else said I needed to do it? As soon as it's somebody else encouraged you to do something and you're not sitting comfortably with it, don't do it. It's not meant for you.
That happens so often. I see it all the time. I used to see it daily pretty much when I worked in universities, because students were there because their parents had told them to be.
Correct.
And it's like, okay, let's look at this and reevaluate your life choices here. This might not be the thing for you.
Correct.
What would you say is, if you could pinpoint like one practice that has helped you really anchor in like your truth, because you feel like really like assured and solid and certain in who you are? What's one thing that's helped you anchor that truth in your daily life?
Journaling.
Nice.
Journaling. A lot of people think that it's meditation, but I was one of those that struggled for years.
Same.
And it's the way I learned how to do it was I started going to yoga classes, and they always end yoga class with shavasana. And at one point in one of these nights during shavasana, I realized there was nothing in my head. I didn't have a thought. I'm like, oh my gosh, this must be what meditation is. Because for me, the egoic mind was always on.
Yeah.
It was always talking. It was always telling me, do this, do that. Don't forget about that. All those things, because a lot of us that have come through trauma are perfectionists, because that's how we hide all the things that are wrong with us.
Yes.
And in doing that, the egoic mind has to continually ruminate and continually play and continue to put those things in front of you so you don't forget what you need to do next. So when I realized that's what Shavasana had taught me, was that I could empty myself, empty the ego, turn that voice off. And now I can do it anywhere. So a lot of times my husband will say, what are you thinking about? And I'll say nothing, because I'm really not thinking about anything. I'm just being present. But that was very hard one. And it took me years to learn to do that. So for me, journaling is something that I did immediately after I came back from New Mexico and when the trauma occurred. And then I stopped because my sister got a hold of my journal and that turned into fiasco. And then I picked it up again sporadically. So I have these journals that have sporadic stuff in them. But when I turned about 40, I really started recognizing how important journaling was. And then I have taken, now the course just left me, Artist's Way. The Artist's Way is a book, and there is a whole practice. And I ended up teaching, taught the Artist's Way a couple of times now. And one of the things that she does in that book is she talks about morning pages, which is her form of journaling. But part of that is tapping into that creativeness that's in you. And what started me back on my creative path was I remembered that I like to color. So, and I have a planner. I always have a planner. And I found a planner where every month you could do a coloring page for that month. And that started me down that creative path again. So I was coloring, then I started doing the paint and sip, then the book came out. And in 2019, I started blogging, and I've blogged weekly. I started the podcast. All this creativity started coming out of me because I realized I like to color. Human beings are meant to play. Human beings are meant to have fun. And somewhere along the way, children are told either they're not good at it, or adults are told you don't have time for that. And the reality is we do have time for that, because that taps into who we authentically are. And we are creative beings, and we can't move through life. We can't do the alchemy of transformation out of darkness and back into the light without learning how that creative process works for us, whether it is playing an instrument or coloring or painting or jewelry making, whatever that is. For me, it's writing. I know for me that I have to write, and I journal every morning. I meditate every morning, and it's those core practices that keep me grounded to remind me that I'm on my highest path.
I love that. And I think it's so important that we do play, because how often are we told to grow up when we're little, and then we do, and then we don't play. And it is so important. And just going back to the meditation thing, because this is something that I find, like, my brain does not switch off. And I know a lot of our listeners will also be people who have very overactive brains, and they're always thinking and always on the go. But I find that play and things like coloring, I've got a coloring book as well. For me, that is like meditation, because you're in flow. And even if your brain doesn't switch off and you've still got those thoughts, journaling is fantastic for that, because you can write them down and get them out. So that really helps me. If I've got a million and one things, I'm like, okay, let's just get them out of the head and onto paper. Then at least it releases some pressure. But also, like, if you are coloring, it helps take that. It's being mindful, isn't it?
Correct. It's a mindfulness practice.
Yes. So even though you're not necessarily eyes closed in meditation with no thoughts, you're giving yourself the space and the time to just be. And we're human beings.
Beings, yes. Beings. Not human doings.
Exactly. So for anyone listening, get a colouring book, go and paint by numbers as well. I used to absolutely love that as a kid. I'd love to give that a go again as an adult. I think
those are wonderful ways to focus in, and in a creative way that gets you out of your head.
Yeah. And if you are a writer like myself and Terri, then probably journaling is lovely. But if you're not, just anything that's going to get you into flow. And it doesn't matter if you're good at it or not, it's just to play and have fun and color outside the lines and get messy.
Exactly.
I love that. Thank you so much for those ideas. I'm just going to have a little look, because as you know, our guests always leave a question for the next guest to answer. So I'm just going to go and grab one for yourself. Let's see what question we are up to. Let's see. Okay. This is really cute, actually, this question. This kind of links to being like childlike and playing. So what makes you get up every day with a smile?
My sweet Lulu. Lulu is a long-haired Chihuahua who used to sleep in bed with me, but she makes too much noise and would wake my husband and I up. So she no longer sleeps in bed with me. So in the morning, I hear this little, when she hears me rolling around, I hear this little scratch on the door where she's saying, I'm awake, come get me. And then we have a few minutes of what I call morning time. So I bring her into bed with me, and my husband's gone to work, and we snuggle for a little bit. She rolls on her back, gets her belly rubbed, and then I get up and she goes and lays down.
Oh, I love that. That sounds like such a sacred morning little ritual as well.
It is. It is for her and I. Yes, it is.
Yeah. Animals are the best. They do give us excellent reasons to wake up with a smile. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And for people who want to explore your world and come and connect with you, where is the best place for them to find you? Where do you tend to hang out?
The best place is my website, terrikozlowski.com. I am across all the social medias, mostly under terrikozlowski.com or Soul Solutions. So my first book, which is the memoir, Raving Transcending Fear, is my alchemy story. And my second book is Soul Solutions for Awakening Awareness. It's the first book in a 7-book series on my 7 steps that I use to do my alchemy and transform my fears into living a life that's thriving. So awakening awareness is that first step, because awakening awareness is the hardest one.
For sure. I agree with that one for sure. Once we have that, then we can go, okay, we're here. Now what? I love that. Thank you. And we'll obviously put all your links and all your details in the show notes as well. And this will actually air on your birthday. So I'm going to say happy birthday now.
Thank you.
In advance. You're the first person to wish you a happy birthday. So I'm sure our listeners will also pop along and drop you a happy birthday message on your socials too.
Thank you.
But thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. And thank you so much for sharing your story with such honesty. And I'm sure there are a million things in here that's going to help our listeners as well.
Fabulous. That's what I'm here for. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And for our listeners, we will see you next week for our next special guest. So have a beautiful week and we will see you soon.